Welcome back. It's now time to talk about the economy broadly as far as the issue of commodities and their prices are concerned, and even as it affects manufacturers. So just a quick dashboard for you. The interest rate is at 2 digits, about 27 or so percent. The inflation numbers is over 30, about 32%. It increased slightly from where it was. It had decreased 2 months excessively, but the last one, due to the cost of energy, has also increased. We've also seen food inflation and all of that. And so people are just generally just wondering, what exactly does the future hold? It feels like it's just a waiting game, and all of that doesn't necessarily mean that wages are increasing to match up the increase in inflation or the rate of increase in inflation. And purchasing power is also reducing. So it's a gamut of issues. So whoever you talk to is pinching everyone. It's something we've been talking about for a very long time. And the rhetoric from the federal government, especially the president, has always been, their reforms are tough, they're difficult, I understand, it's going to be painful, but it's going to be better tomorrow. How long? It's a different kettle of fish. Nobody has really told us. But we've heard some people mention a few things, but not from the federal government. We're being joined on the program by an economist, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, the CEO of Crude Asset Management. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Mr. Chukwu, you can see how it's almost like a repeat and rinse situation that we found ourselves since this policy has come to be. And the feelers, if you look broadly, that comes from the federal government, help me to maybe break it down. It feels like, look, we understand what you're going through. It's going to be painful. We know it's brutal, but it's necessary. But the average Nigerian subconsciously is saying, let's even take your word that is necessary, because everybody said they will remove one form of subsidy or the other. We can debate as to how it was removed, whether it was removed rightly. But how long will this pain last is a question that everybody's trying to be evasive from. Can you intervene?
That's a tough question to ask anybody. How long will the economic pain last? What I would say to us is that what are those things that we can do or start doing now to reduce the time it will take us to come out of this difficulty? I think that's the key thing. You know, it's similar to saying you want to go for an operation. The first thing you have to realize that if you're going to go for a bone resetting operation, so you have a dislocation or you have a fracture, you're going to go through some pains. So it's expected you go through some pains. But the question is that when you're going through the pains, the doctors will administer some pain relief medication to use to reduce the pain you are going to go through. And they will also tell you, okay, it will take 6 months to heal because this is a femur bone or stuff like that. So, but for us as a country, which is applicable not just to us as a country, what are applicable to anywhere in the world, they are going through the kind of structuring we are going through now. There are some basics that should drive the economic transformation or the structuring we are going through. One of which we need to restart production. If we do not restart production, then there is no time limit to this suffering. Because the concept of adjusting exchange rate, removing subsidy, is that you are saying you want to stimulate local production of those goods that you are currently importing. You want to cut down on import as well as stimulate exports. If you have set a monetary and fiscal policy environment that is supposed to incentivize export and reduce import, then you must also make sure that there are things to be produced that will at the minimum replace those that have been imported. So locals or your citizens will be able to buy those things that are now being produced locally because they cannot afford imported ones. There are also locals that will be stimulated or encouraged to produce, to export and diversify your foreign exchange earnings so that your exchange rate will stabilize and the import-induced inflation will moderate. So those are the things that are left to be done. What are we doing to stimulate productive activities? Starting from agriculture, for instance. The greatest challenge we have today in terms of cost of living crisis is coming from food production. Agriculture, we saw an agricultural sector that is growing at 1.41% in the second quarter of this year. That is growing at a rate that is less than the population growth rate, about 2.4%. We know that agricultural production has weakened or slowed down in the major food belts of this country. So if we can address the challenge that agricultural sector is facing, which is principally issue of insecurity, we will moderate the current suffering in Nigeria going through the cost of living crisis. Previously, Nigeria never had a challenge of feeding itself. But because of insecurity, we are now dealing with issues we can't feed ourselves. So if we improve food production, you are going to reduce the pressure people are going to go through. And then other things we can discuss as we progress in the program.
Sorry, Bukola, which brings me to my follow-up question, because I understand the fact that when these policies are put in place, say removing PMS, subsidy from PMS, even subsidizing effect, because that's what exactly it is. Not defending it, it means not subsidizing it. So we see all of this high interest rate that gives us this volatile capital in the short term, hot money, and we haven't seen the level of FDI that this is supposed to attract. The president has made a broadcast. I don't know whether it's an error that we've attracted 30 billion in terms of FDI. That's not exactly true. They also talked about the issue of we're out of ways and means. That was not exactly true, because we just spread it out and it's no longer a chokehold. So if the idea is to the effect that people need to start opening shop in Nigeria, whether Nigerians or people abroad bringing in their money in terms of FDI, and we're not getting it, what is going wrong, Mr. Chukwu?
Well, what is not happening is that we have not really sat down to ask ourselves, how do we make our economy an attractive destination for investors? I think that's what is missing. You can be an attractive destination for investors for productive purposes. In that case, you have regular power supply, you have cheap labor, you have well-skilled labor that are tuned to go into to engage in manufacturing. You have the logistic infrastructure. Goods can come into your seaports and be moved out quickly. And then exportable goods can actually go through your seaports and go out quickly at minimal cost. These are synchronon, or what you call minimum, irreducible minimum, that manufacturers will be looking for to come and produce in your country. They can actually say, okay, today we have low purchasing power, we have low household income, so the demand will be weak in Nigeria, but we can produce for the entire African continent, which ordinarily, and then you also believe that as that productive activity goes on, income will grow and the local market consumption will grow, which is what happened in China. What did China do? China built world-class infrastructure. China's power supply cost is one of the cheapest in the world, comparable to what we pay for power supply. China built the highways, the seaport, the rail lines. And then China also trained its people and then optimize the benefit of its population. It trained its people in the skills. Like one of the IT experts in the US said that, look, some software engineers, it will take the entire software engineers in America will fill a hall, but they will fill several stadia in China. So they created a workforce, they created a supporting infrastructure environment that encouraged productive activities, and the world began to produce in China. Eventually, income grew in China, and China is now a domestic consumer market. So that's where we should start. Let's build the infrastructure that we need to stimulate productivity. Then the investors will come here and set up manufacturing outfits. We must maintain some level of macroeconomic stability. You can't have the kind of wide gyration we have in exchange rate. And then you expect investors to come in. Geoffrey, just cast your mind back. Some 20 years ago, manufacturing outfits were coming here. Foreign manufacturers, P&G, Procter & Gamble came to set up in Ibadan, a world-class manufacturing outfit. We saw the likes of Nigerian breweries expanding the Build-Ama breweries, expanding their footprint in the country. They bought the big breweries in Aba. They were expanding the same thing with GSK, Nestle. But today, these companies I've mentioned, many of them have left this country because the environment had become very inclement for them to continue to operate. Until we make the environment attractive to even local and existing manufacturers, we're not going to attract foreign manufacturers. So that is the missing gap.
Well, Mr. Chukwu, I'd like you to review some of the support for Nigeria's economic reforms as expressed by the World Bank. Just recently, the country director was commending the CBN's economic reforms, saying that they're on the right path. And in another breath, you know, the World Bank would also say that about 50% of Nigerians are living in poverty. I wonder for you, do you see their commendation and their report on the statistics of the concerns about Nigeria's Human Development Index, do they align for you? And Should Nigeria begin to review her relationship with the Bretton Woods institution? Mr. Chukwu, did you get my question?
Okay, they are not conflicting report. We are actually, yes, absolutely. I got your question. They are not conflicting report. They are actually addressing two completely different issues. One is the issue of economic reforms, particularly as it relates to monetary policies specifically. And then the other aspect has to do with the level of poverty in the country, the cost of living in the country, and the incidence of poverty in the country. Let's start from the first part, which is the issue of monetary policies. The monetary policy objective of the central bank is to maintain price stability. So the central bank's objective is not necessary, unlike the US Federal Reserve Bank, which has a twin objective of price stability as well as full employment. But Nigeria's central bank primary objective is to maintain price stability. So what they have done is that, irrespective of what happens elsewhere or the impact of those policies, they are focused on how do we keep exchange rate stable, how do we lower inflation rate, how do we reduce interest rate. So those are the three major things they are looking at: exchange rate, interest rate, and cost of credit. So that's their focus. And primarily, if you look at the central bank policy in the past couple of months, it's mostly focused on maintaining price stability. Unfortunately, they have not been able to succeed in doing that. But contrary to that objective, there is also the objective to grow the economy. So, and we know that these issues do not align, in the sense that if you take policies to slow down inflation rate, slow down consumption, you're also going to slow down economic productive activities. So the impact of that is that we're seeing an increase in the level of unemployment. We're seeing an increase in the cost of living of most households. We are seeing a depression in the standard of living of Nigerians. So, but the World Bank was mentioning two different things. So it's not a matter of whether we should review our relationship with the World Bank. The question is that, do we have well-developed monetary and fiscal policies that are focused on the priorities of the economy today? Every country should develop its policies based on its domestic needs. Today, we have the challenge of productive activities, production. We have the issues of unemployment. We have the issues of high inflation rates. What are the internally or locally developed policies that will address that? And I can dwell on that for the next 1 hour. One of these is that the first thing is that we need to look at the cost of living crisis we are going through. Is it externally induced or locally induced? It's purely locally induced issue of food production, which I have highlighted earlier. The other aspect is crude oil production, which is also locally induced challenge we have today. If we increase our crude oil production, and I'm happy that the federal government is alluding to that they want to increase crude production by 1 million barrels every year. If we increase crude production, we're going to improve our foreign.
It appears that we have connectivity challenges just when we're getting some direction about solutions to improving the economy. As we await the stability of the network, Mr. Chukwu, if you can hear me, the importance of that question is to the effect that if the World Bank commends the economic reforms of the administration in one breath, and then also expresses concerns about Human Development Index, doesn't it show that perhaps the economic policies are not yielding the desired results? That's the need for the review of some of the influence and the direction of the responses of the International Bretton Woods Institution on Nigeria's economy. Speaking of which, if we look at also another aspect of it, which is the social safety net, which is a direct response of some of the to some of the economic challenges, are you seeing the social safety net response being viable to act as a shock absorber to the harsh economic policies, i.e. subsidy removal? Are you seeing any result in that regard, or is it a matter of accountability yet again?
I think both are some of the challenges we have. The social safety net that the government has put in place. We know the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs was suspended because of issue of accountability, so we cannot dismiss the fact that it's an issue of accountability. But we also look at the structures or they put in place, the system they put in place to reach out to the most vulnerable in the society. I think that's still questionable. We've not really developed a comprehensive database of the most vulnerable in the country. And unfortunately, the number of the vulnerable is increasing. So, and that leads us to, what do we need to do to stop the descent of households into poverty? And that's why I said, look, let's start from the minimum, the irreducible minimum issues of food. You know, Bukola, if most households can afford to eat and can afford to live in decent accommodation and can move around, transport themselves, that's what the basic that other countries offer. If you go to a place like England, you don't see so many people who are very rich. But an average English person will be able to commute by train from his residence to the office and commute by train back home at relatively affordable cost. An average household in England will be able to feed. And those are two basic requirements according to Maslow. They are basic physiological needs of man. And unfortunately, when people are not able to eat, and the first measure of poverty is inability to feed yourselves. And that's why the World Bank criteria for measuring poverty is $1.9 income per day. And if you can't afford that, then it simply means you can't feed well. So let's start even by addressing the issue, which I think if the government is serious, we can address in the next 6 months, because the cycle, the gestation period of most of the crops we produce there is less than 6 months. You see maize, cassava, tuber, but farmers should be able to go to their farm unhindered by what we call unknown gun, bandits. And if we can address that, we will, in the next 6 months, be able to reduce this level of economic difficulty Nigerians are going through.
All right, Mr. Johnson, I'm happy you're here to give us direct intervention, which is why I like when you bring your thoughts to the issue. You're quite specific. So let's go to some specifics. The truth is that for a very long time, we haven't diversified our economy. When we look at our portfolio in terms of our trade, we look at the level of exports we do, we know that crude oil still accounts for about 70 to 74%. So if crude oil is still our major cash cow and remains our major cash cow, I think there should be some level of state of emergency in that sector. And the bone of contention, we can't control what pricing is, but we can manage what production is. It's not a question of what quota we're allowed to put out in the market. And we've been struggling. In fact, the Nigerian government or the NNPCL puts out numbers that comprises of crude and condensate, but OPEC doesn't consider condensate. So we're far away from target. And this constant statement about we want to improve, everybody's exhausted. What is holding us back? It's just like saying that this is my biggest source of revenue and everything lies within my power. I have the military, I have community relations, I am the government. Why can't we get our numbers up, in your view?
Geoffrey, there's a song that says, if you ask me, who will I ask? I don't know whether you're familiar with that song.
I know the song.
Okay, good. The question he asks us, this question should be thrown to the executive arm of government. Like you said, they have the military. Today, there's technology that you can use to monitor every part of your country. We have Google, we have even the commercial Google they can pinpoint. Geoffrey, the truth is that you can actually, by technology, I am sitting in my house, I'm sitting in my sitting room. It's there. And at this point, we are conversing. So the government has the tools to monitor the crude pipelines. The government has the tools to monitor those who are breaching the pipelines. Why they've not been able to arrest the issue of crude theft, crude pipeline breaches, it's as good as you can imagine. The answer is as good as you can imagine. So I think the government has its job well cut out. The truth is that if we arrest the issue of crude theft, breach of crude pipelines, we're going to see an improvement in crude production. Because some of the wells that are shut in, that they can't produce because they don't have evacuation channels. So people are now using virtual evacuation channels. They're hiring batches to now batch their crude, which is a very expensive process. Well, as we have the pipeline that can be repaired and crude could pipe into the pipelines and go to the export terminals. So it's all about what the government does, which I said when I spoke about the World Bank. I said the World Bank is referring to the policies of the monetary authorities. There is also the bigger elephant in the room, which is the fiscal authorities. Most of the issues that we are dealing with now that are causing the challenge are the full steps of the fiscal authorities. Improve crude production. There are several, of course, we have driven away many of the major oil companies from the onshore and shallow offshore assets to the deep offshore assets because of this insecurity. Hopefully, if we address that, they will begin to come back. But even Nigerian operators will also be able to ratchet up their crude production. And then if we are producing 2 million barrels only, consistently, for the next 6 months, we will rebuild our reserve and we won't be where we are today. We will actually come out of where we are today. And the second quarter of this year, crude oil and fossil fuel export, that is including LNG and other gases, accounted for 91% of our exports. So, and remember the second quarter, we only produce an average of 1.41 million barrels a day. So assuming we are producing 2 million barrels or 2.5 million barrels, which we had achieved in the past, we wouldn't be where we are today. And if the government can arrest this, so the question is, what is holding them back? Like I said, the song goes, if you ask me, who should I ask?
At the end of the day, but just in one, maybe 30 seconds before you go, because as you were talking, I was just thinking to the issue of the NNPCL and all of the argument as to where this plays out, because we see a situation where our revenue from upstream is used to defray costs of subsidy, and then we forego our dividends as a federal government, which impacts everything for us at the end of the day. But I want you to speak briefly in 30 seconds to the issue of FX. FX is killing. What has to be done? This stability, moderation, this language economists use to say, oh, it's stable at 1.5 and all of that. I think the Naira is grossly undervalued. What can be done? Because if it comes down to 1,000, let's even not go too far, 1,000, the issue of PMS prices will also go down.
I'm so happy you are alluding to that. You're making that specific. That's a fact. The reality is that if we, in December, the foreign market was 1,206 naira. That's where we closed. Today we are about 1,720 naira. Official rate was about 907 naira. We are now over 1,500 or 1,600. The only way, or the shortest way, it's not the only way, the shortest route to FX stability and possible FX appreciation is crude oil production. That's the shortest route. Any other route is a tortuous route where we reverse in a matter of days or months. The concept of let's increase treasury bills yield to 22% or 30% and attract foreign portfolio investment. They will invest for a maximum of 364 days. And by the time they want to take out their money, you will struggle to fund them. We will only have one route in the short term to addressing FX liquidity and foreign exchange rates, and that is crude oil production.
Founder, MD, Carry Asset Management. If you ask me who I go ask, I'll put that in mind at the end of the day. We brought you to help us. You're not asking me, what do I? Thank you so much for coming on the program. We appreciate you, sir. We hope and we hope that things are going to get better. It's our country, so we don't have a choice.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. We'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll switch gears. The issue of tanker accidents, a menace on our highway. What can be done? The authorities are here to explain to us. Join us again.